It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy, back at the Hometown Commander. We're back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to out-brew the Magic world. Today we are finishing up our 2023 roundup, getting through new commanders and old, updating some, brewing some new ones. And Harbin was a deck that I looked at back in the Brothers' War when it came out, but I thought that we did get some interesting new soldiers, both in Lord of the Rings and some other sets this year, so I wanted to try to bring this deck back and see what we had for it. As always, the deck list is down in the description for you to take a gander at. I think what this deck gained a lot of since the last time we looked at it was a little bit of the human/soldier support in Lord of the Rings. A card or two got reprinted, and one or two random new soldiers really just added to kind of what I think the deck wants to do. The cool part about Harbin, our commander today, is a 2-mana 3/2 human soldier with flying. So whenever we attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures that we control get +1/+1 to gain flying until end of turn. So we're trying to declare attack with 5 soldiers, get everything in the air to try to get around our opponents to deal in for some damage. And we're going to do this a couple ways. We've got some soldiers that, or some creatures that are going to make tokens to allow us to go wider that way. Most of our soldiers are pretty cheap, so we can just go wide that way, but we do have a few things that are going to make us tokens. We're going to go wide, attack, try to benefit from the attacks, and then we do have a little bit of a +1/+1 counter kind of sub theme in the deck with a few cards that we're going to talk about in ways to just grow our board and try to take advantage of the flying to help hit our opponents harder. But let's talk about first off that token go wide sub theme. We have a lot of great soldiers, and they're going to do a good job at filling out our board, but there's a couple that are going to help make us tokens. Darian, King of Keldor, says whenever we're dealt damage, we make that many 1/1 soldiers. This is going to help kind of have our opponents think about whether or not they want to attack or whether they want to deal damage to us. If they're just going to give us 1/1s that we can then use to turn around and attack with and potentially get in the air. Hero Bladehold says whenever it attacks, we get 2 1/1 white soldier tokens that are tapped and attacking. The trigger here wouldn't add to the 5 that would be Harbin's, that I recall correctly, because I think you have to declare the attack with 5 soldiers, but this will still get those in and get them attacking our opponents. Night Captain Eos comes in and gets us 2 soldiers, and then we can actually pay a white to sack a soldier to prevent combat damage dealt to us, which isn't a bad little upside. Mural, whenever it attacks, is going to get us soldier tokens, where it acts as the number of soldiers we control. This is going to be a very easy way to start growing our board of soldiers, especially when our opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments on our turn, which should ideally help us protect on our turn. Skystrike Officer can make a token when it attacks. Resolute Reinforcement comes in with an extra 1 whenever it comes in. And then we have something like Basri Ked is -2, says whenever one of our non-token creatures attack, we make that many 1/1 soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. The good part, though, about Hero Bladehold's effect and Basri's effect is, although those the ones that come in tapped and attacking don't count for the amount of creatures that were declared as attacks, they will get the buff as long as we put those triggers on the stack above Harbin's ability. Then they can still get that +1/+1 and flying to benefit them in that combat that they've now come down in, tapped and attacking. Okay. So there's an example of some of the cards that can kind of get us wide, get us some extra bodies. Let's start to talk a little bit about how we're going to take advantage of attacking. And the first is abilities like Biden of Thassa. They're going to draw us cards when creatures deal damage to our opponents. This is going to help us make sure that when we're connecting, even with our small 1/1s or 1 or 2 little creatures, we can draw cards to fill our hand and keep ourselves ramping. We're not in green. We don't have that natural land ramp that other people have. We need to make sure we're drawing cards and getting cards into our hand. Kindred Discovery does something very similar. Whenever a creature of our chosen type comes in or attacks, we get that. So Kindred Discovery works very well for choosing soldier and, drawing cards anytime a soldier comes in or we attack with one. And that'll allow us to continue to fill our hand and get our cards down. We're also playing around with some things like reconnaissance that can give our creatures vigilance. Reconnaissance is a very old card that's abused to give all of our creatures vigilance, which we will take advantage of. Things like blind obedience to try to get our opponent's creatures in tapped to help us with that. And then virtue of loyalty, a card that actually plays in a little bit to our vigilance, but also into our +1/+1 counter theme, where at the beginning of our end step we put a counter on each creature we control and untap all of them, which will give us vigilance basically. But all of our creatures get that counter. Cathar's Crusade is another card that's going to help us in this counter sub-theme, but also just in helping hit harder. We have these creatures that make tokens when they attack. Cathar's Crusade is going to be very quick to end the game once you get enough creatures coming in, as if you have 4 or 5 creatures enter at the same time, you're now putting 4 or 5 +1/+1 counters on your entire board. And this is going to help us to push towards ending the game that way. As far as creature goes, we have things like Anafenza. Whenever a non-token creature comes in, we bolster 1, putting a counter on our weakest creature. Danny Pink says the creatures we control have, whenever 1 or more counters are put on this creature for the first time each turn, draw a card. This can allow us to get counters on things with Virtual Loyalty or something like Siege Veteran, just to draw us a couple cards and start refilling our hand that way. Things like Thalia's Lieutenant get counters on its own by other things coming in. Metallic Mimic, if we can get it down and choose Soldier, gives every soldier a +1/+1 counter when it comes in, no matter whether we, it's not on cast, it's just any soldier that comes in gets that +1/+1 counter. So you can see we start to have these kind of effects that can take advantage of any of these +1/+1 counters we can put down and help us out with our ability to try to get taller. We did see Sun Quan, Lord of Wu, get a reprint in Commander Masters, all creatures we control having horsemanship. This is a great way for us to just flat out end the game, as then our creatures won't be blockable, and that'll help us get in for bigger damage. We have things like Baragon of the Guard, which can give all of our creatures vigilance as long as a human comes in. And most of our soldiers are humans, so this will allow us to give vigilance for the turn to our creatures and a +1/+1 just buff for the turn, allowing them to hit in harder. We get to add things like Boromir, which can start to slightly shut down our opponents. So if when our opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent, then counter it, but we can also sack it to give our whole board indestructible, which can be helpful. A card I think is kind of fun just because it can help kind of hopefully try to slow down our opponents a little bit is Lavinia Azorius Renegade. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with CMC greater than the number of lands that player controls. This should hopefully stop our opponents from ramping up too hard and using their artifacts to cast really big spells. And then again, if an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, count that spell. It's just a way to a little bit to play with our opponents. Things like Pippin can protect our creatures and give them that way. And then of course Roaming Throne can not only double Harbin but double so much in our deck. Invasion of Gobekon on the backside does a very similar thing, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked, and that can be helpful, and then it can sacrifice itself to give our kind of a heroic intervention style effect to all our creatures, as well as we're playing things like Flawless Maneuver and Clever Concealment to protect our board. Kind of a fun card in the deck if we can set up in the right scenarios is Mystic Reflection. It says choose target non-legendary creature. The next time 1 or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield under the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. This card can be kind of fun if you're using something like Mural to make tokens. You could pick another non-legendary soldier that we really want and get extra copies of them, whether that be something like Roaming Throne or Siege Veteran or any of these other ones, and just get extra copies of them instead of those 1/1 count tokens, which I think we'd want no matter what. And then that would allow us to build ourselves up better on board and really take advantage of that. There could be a scenario where you pick Resolute Reinforcements and basically get to double the amount of those counters or those tokens because the tokens come in as copy of reinforcements, which then make extra 1/1s. So you can see with a spell like that, you can start to take advantage of particular situations with what you can make. But again, go wide, get in combat, and try to use our Harbin's flying advantage to our advantage in combat. But let's get into our Goldfish scenario. Starting out with our fresh 7 here, we got 3 lands, Resolute Reinforcements to start getting some creatures. We got Martial Coup, which can make tokens or can act as a board wipe, which makes it great in that sense because it allows us to do multiple things. We see a Siege Veteran. So turn 1, we have a port town that we cannot put in that we cannot, that'll come in tapped. The Sea Clouds ideally here would come in untapped because we're in a 4-player game, and that Nimbus Maze is only going to tap for colorless at the moment, so I don't really see anything good turn 1. We'll put that Port Town in tapped. Turn 2, we draw Winds of Abandon. We'll put that Nimbus Wave down. And I think here we get the Pearl Medallion down, making all white spells cost 1 less to cast. This is great because it won't reduce Harbin, but it's going to reduce a lot of these creatures, as most of the soldiers in our deck are actually white. Turn 3, we'll put that Sea of Clouds down, and now we can ideally get Siege Veteran down and Resolute reinforcements. Now we could wait till our opponent's turn on the reinforcements if we want to, or we can get it out with a Siege Veteran and get a counter at it. But anyway, now we'd be up to 3 soldiers. And the good part to remember with Harbin is Harbin doesn't have to attack. We just have to attack with 5 soldiers. So that's good to remember when it comes to getting our things right onto the board, is that we don't care about Harbin attacking. We just care about that. I think I like the Fireman Commando. I guess there's 2 schools of thought. We could Martial Coup for 3, because it would cost us 4 mana, which we have, or we could do the Fireman Commando. And I think I like the Commando just because this turn we can draw. Maybe we can get in with the Veteran or get in with the Resolute somewhere. Get a counter. Let's say we can, and there we draw into the Soul Ring. And then this turn we could get Harbin down, get the Soul Ring down, and I think we're still 1 off this attack, but that's okay. Get another attack in, maybe draw another card, put the Beach down and tapped, and then this turn, Cavern of Souls down for the soldiers, play a big Martial Coup, leave up the Dovin's Veto or the Swords of Plowshares, some removal, and again, here, we're just going to try to find a way to get this Martial Coup down for 4 so that we don't wipe the board, and then start attacking in with flying, and then maybe on the next turn we draw something relevant for our strategy. Again, not a bad board state here. The Fireman Commando hopefully should be drawing us cards as we start attacking in or trying to get in with our things, especially Harbin and Fireman Commando both having flying can get in fairly safely until we can fill the board up where they all can get in. But again, obviously that Fireman Commando we could have just cooed instead, and that would have opened up the Harbin play to have that attack there. I think there's probably arguments for that, but I like that. I like this, and then we're just a board wipe. We're obviously a board wipe away from being stopped, but again, that could be a reason to leave up the Martial Coup. Because remember, Harbin doesn't have to attack in order to get his ability. So what we could have done in a odd scenario is, let's say the board got wiped here, play a big Martial Coup to get a bunch of creatures, pull Harbin out the next turn, and then get them all into the air on that attack. So, there's definitely a lot of play lines, I think, with Harbin that we can take advantage of. Now, this is a deck that doesn't have the biggest budget in the world. Obviously, the more budget you want to put into the deck, the better you can get in with your spells. Your enchantments, heuristic studies, more card draw, that kind of thing. I try my best to get a good mixture of card draw without going too heavy on the card draw, but I think, right, at the end of the day, the card draw is the one thing that balances out our lack of ramp. But let me know what you think of Harbin down in the comment section below. This is a deck that I find interesting. Still probably not what I would choose to build for myself, but I think it's interesting, and I like the idea of seeing these tribal decks in Azorius colors instead of these white creature decks, which almost always go into red or into green. Cool enough, we just saw a few weeks back, we saw Colonel Mustard get spoiled for Ravnica, Murders at Karlov Manor for the Clue Edition. So obviously we'll be brewing Colonel Mustard when that comes up, so we'll get to see Boros soldiers, and we can see how they differ. Maybe as decks, I would probably lean more towards Boros because you get a lot more of that attack. Right, you get a lot more of that attack support in Boros. But let me know what you think of Harbin down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next.